Hello, beautiful lights. It's Death Doula Kimberly again, coming on to share my stories and my experience, strength, and hope around death, dying, end of life care, and shifting consciousness on this planet, maybe even changing the way we do end of life care. So today I am talking about when I started volunteering for hospice, the very first client that I had. So this story is the very first hospice patient that I worked with when I started volunteering for hospice. This was a man who was older. He had been in the military and he had signed on to hospice because he had, I think, lung cancer and a lot of lung issues. And he was stage 4 and pretty much on the track of dying, and had made a personal choice in his life to sign on to hospice. He had this very lovely wife who was very devoted to him, very devoted to her spirituality and her church. And she played organ at the church, as a matter of fact. So as a fresh new volunteer, I shared in my first video when I was talking about how I came into being in this field and talking about death and dying issues and working with people at the end of their lives. When I started volunteering, I had listened to Ram Dass, who wrote the book Be Here Now. And he talked about the powerful, powerful spiritual experiences that you can have, the energy and presence that you can provide to people when they're at the end of their life by sitting at the bedside in full mindful, loving presence, just holding space for that person. So that's what I decided to do at 32 years old. When I started volunteering for hospice, I showed up to this couple's house. He was upstairs in a bedroom. His wife was so super grateful that I could come and just sit with him. I was not a medical person or a social worker or anything at the time. I was volunteering for hospice. And I was doing a lot of what a death doula does at the end of life, where they're going to sit and offer presence to the patient. And I also, during my time with them, offered presence to his wife as well, and just being there with them. So at the time, I sat with him and I just sat total silence. I calmed my mind as much as I could. I had been practicing mindfulness meditation at this point for about 2 years, 2.5 years. So I was able to really sit there and just open my heart and allow him to be where he was. And these beautiful things started happening. He would tell me his stories. I call that life review. That's another very important piece of being a death doula and providing end-of-life care, is being able to listen to, witness, and sometimes even process with the story of that person's life, maybe the guilt, the shame, the experiences that they've had. So he was sharing certain stories that were very important to him, and he would share them as I visited over and over again. And I remember just allowing him to be wherever he was, just sitting in full presence and just offering him that open heart space. I believe the same thing that Ram Dass was talking about, that the most important thing that someone really wants or needs when they are facing either the potential of the possibility of their life ending, them transitioning out of this human life and into the non-physical. That's the way that I view it. So you'll hear me talk about that, transitioning from this physical realm to the non-physical. That during that process, it is so helpful to have people around you that will just listen and be in full presence and just offer space and be that for that person. Since then, I've also learned that that's a great tip to offer anyone. I just watched a beautiful male coach do that for a woman who was really waking up to and experiencing some stuff, that we were all just holding space for her and just like being with her. That's what I was doing for this man. In the process of it, I remember him thanking me because in telling me how patient I was with him, and just really expressing this gratitude for having someone there who was just allowing him to tell his stories and telling them over and over again, and making peace with himself and with his past as he was able to kind of life review these things. He would also, after a period of time, start to tell the story and then kind of pass out or go into coma state. And then he would come back and he would finish telling his story. And he really expressed appreciation for me just holding space, just being fully present. And I had not studied, I had not had any experience with being there with people. So there were some things that happened that, as I continue to share experiences and share information on my channel, there are things that happen in the process of letting go of this human story, this human identity and body. As you're dropping that body, as you're dropping the story, as you're letting go of this life, the things that happen often. There is a book that I recommend. It is a book that was written many years ago by two hospice nurses. It was something that anyone who worked for hospice and was at the bedside of people that were dying had been noticing. These two women took advantage of their experiences in a very positive way. I don't know if advantage is the right word there, but really took their experiences as hospice nurses and put them in the book. And it's called Nearing Death Awareness, was the phrase that they had coined in the book. The book itself is by Maggie Callanan and Pat Kelly, and it's titled Final Gifts. So these are the final gifts that come with people who are in the process of dying, in the process of that sort of like active end of life, in this case, choosing to be on hospice place. So I didn't know it at the time. I had experiences with this man that matched what they talked about in Final Gifts. And one of those things is that the person who is, we'll just say the dying person, the person who's in the process of transformation, dying, they know that that's happening, right? We think they don't know. They know it's happening. And they usually know when it's really getting ready to come. And there are many, many ways that nearing death awareness happens, and many signs of it happening. In this experience with this particular man, this beautiful man, when he was at the end of his life, there were a few things that happened. One was when there's stored trauma in that person, that can get triggered at the end of life if that energy is stored there. And they call it terminal agitation sometimes. I've come to believe that that is energy that's opening up, and it's unprocessed trauma, it's unreleased trauma. So he had been in war, and someone brought in a huge oxygen tank for him so that he could breathe, and he needed to have that like really big one to be on backup for if the electricity ever went out. They have like these big oxygen tanks, and he went into total trauma response because he thought that it was a warhead, that it was something that, would have been very dangerous in the war that he had been in. So he had that massive trauma response and that terminal agitation. So there's a lot of ways that we can approach that in end of life care. And that's something that I'll get into in later episodes around. There's beautiful medications that can help with that. There's also energy healing that can help with that. There's when the person is able to be in some consciousness, really walking them through it. And I will tell a story at some point of a 101-year-old woman who people thought it was just this like agitation and she's acting crazy. Well, one of the hospice workers and I worked with her and sat with her and held space and discovered that it was actually a trauma from when she was 3 years old. So those type of things will come up at end of life and present themselves in different ways. And that's why it's very helpful to understand these things and to have support. So that had come up for him, and we were able to be really supportive to him and hold space and assist him through that. The other thing that happened was he was really, like I said, life reviewing through all the regrets. And then one day he looked at me and he took a deep breath and he said, "I guess this is it," and breathed out. That is a sign that he is in that nearing death awareness. He knows that he's getting ready to leave. Within 24 hours, he had taken his last breath from when he said that to me to when he took the last breath. There are many other ways that that nearing death awareness can come about. I strongly suggest, if you're interested in this information, if you're interested in doing death doula work, if you're interested in hospice work, working in any way, being around end of life care, to read the book Final Gifts. It really gives a lot of great information about what happens when people are dying, and that near-death awareness spiritually that can happen. So I'm starting to wake up more and more to this idea of there's more to this life than what I had previously thought when I lived very, I call it third dimensional consciousness, which is like you're your body, you're your thoughts, you are your job, you are your everything that's like material, all this is real. That perhaps there might be some kind of energy, there might be some kind of soul, there might be some kind of spirit, and that it's not just like that's it, it's done, no more, which is where I had come from with my friend Chris, that like I couldn't imagine that perhaps there's more to life than just the material. And so as I worked for hospice, he said this thing, it's a nearing death awareness thing. And before I left, he said, "Thank you." And in a way that seemed like really final to me. And as I move forward in my career in the 10 years that I worked in this field, I had many, many patients that would say thank you to me in the exact same way. And I had come to realize what that meant. It was a nearing death awareness of the patient saying thank you and goodbye to me. So what happened next was he did go into a coma, and he was showing the signs and symptoms of someone. I believe the name of the woman is Barbara Carnes, and she wrote a book, a little pamphlet that's about what to expect within the last 3 months. And it's not coming to my head right now. I promise to put it in the comments down below. Um, and I usually know that off the top of my head. I have a copy of it on my shelf. I'm seeing this like light blue book, and the name of this book that I've handed to hundreds and thousands of different people to understand what happens. It's Barbara Carnes. She has a ton of really great information. She's on YouTube sharing a lot of really great information. If you're interested, check her out. So the story goes on that he goes into a coma. He's showing all the signs and symptoms of someone who's getting ready to leave within the next like 24 hours. And his wife and I had really bonded. So she requested that that little volunteer come back and be with them. And I learned some other really amazing hospice things when I showed up. One of them was that the dog at this point in the house would not leave his side. That dog was attached to him, attached to the bed. They literally had to carry the little doggy outside so the dog could go to the bathroom, and the dog would bolt back up to the bed. One of the things I understand is we used to say in hospice, if you want to know how the patient's doing, check the pet, check the dog, check the cat, because they usually know. And the dog knew what was happening and was like dedicated to being there with this human that was getting ready to let go. The hospice team was there. I came in and I learned a couple of things. One is that there is a certain smell that is definitely very technical. Any of my nurses or doctors from hospice could tell you about it. I nicknamed it the death smell. It's a very familiar smell to me when I know someone's getting really, really close, probably within hours or less of taking their last breath. I also learned that the hearing is the last to go. So that is huge for people to understand when it comes to end of life care and creating comfort in a comfortable environment for that hospice person, that person, not necessarily on hospice, even if they're like in a hospital, that it's important when they're facing those last like 24 to 74 hours, particularly the last couple of hours. That's why the death doula movement is creating people that do the doula work, where they're going to come and assist the family and assist anyone else who's providing care in doing a death vigil and making sure that the space is conducive for that person to have a peaceful transition, if that's something that the family or the patient are really wanting. And so in this case, they really were attempting to keep it peaceful and keep him comfortable. And I was amazed that he heard my voice and he raised his eyebrow to show me that he knew it was me. And that was such a blessing that, you know, I had worked with them for like, I guess 2 or 3 months. I had shown up once a week to sit with him so his wife could go play the organ at church. It was a 4-hour just sit with him and spend time with him. So, and spend time with her too when she came back. It was really 4 hours with both of them. And what I found out was he let go within like an hour or two of me stopping by and saying goodbye, and energetically still offering him that space. So that's my story of the very first hospice kind of volunteer experience that I had. And that really woke me up and opened me up to end of life care and to really being present with my patients and really starting to open up spiritually around the whole thing. I remember it just being profound for me as a 32-year-old who was probably about 2 or 2.5 years from hitting a really hard bottom in my life and then coming out of it. And it was like I had like somewhat of a spiritual awakening. Now I'm really having like even more at this point. So I'm passionate about end of life care, about death and dying, about being able to talk about it openly, and about people being able to make their own choices. The other thing that happened is I'm also passionate around providing support to people and offering that same presence for the loved ones that are left behind, making sure that they have the support that they need on the other side of it. And apparently, I've been that way my whole life, that all my friends and family members and different people like that had come to me because somehow I'm hardwired to be able to be with people's like really deep, difficult emotions. Everyday emotions, not so much. Manipulation emotions, definitely not at all. But if you're in a real, true, deep feelings that come with the grieving process, the sadness, the anger, the guilt, the shame, any of that type of stuff that you're processing through, that's what I was able to like really hold space for. So this woman felt so bonded by the volunteer experience that I had. She had me come in and as a volunteer do the grief work with her. That was the beginning of my like 10 years of being and doing this type of work. And I get the same thing a lot of people get when they do any type of death and dying work. Oh, I can't believe you're doing that. That's so hard, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I get that. It's just, I understand a level of like just holding space for people when they're really needing it and really holding space for those deeper level emotions. And also I understand the importance of when someone's dying, like holding a higher vibration for them and being able to be just a full presence there for them. If you want to know how to help someone who's grieving, offer them your heart and your presence, that you'll be that listener, that you'll hold space for whatever comes up for them without having to fix it. And then also with someone who's dying is like open up that presence and allow them that opportunity to talk about whatever it is they need to talk about. And that's a lot of my stories that I'll be bringing in. And I'll also talk about a lot of other things like the grieving process for people that might not know that. If you're listening to this and you get to the end of this, thank you so much for listening to this content. It's very dear to my heart. And I hope that I bring it through in a way that is helpful and useful to people that are listening. If you like the content, definitely feel free to like, share, subscribe, put in comments. If you have questions about end of life issues, feel free to put them in and I can make some content off of that as well. So I'm just offering this out and definitely putting some of that out there. I hope that this story and this information is useful for you. I'm going to bring more through in the future. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. All of my information is listed below. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to ask questions and post your comments in the comment section down below.